After how much I enjoyed the last episode, I feel like anything we got was going to feel like a step down for me, so I want to try and keep that in mind when I review this episode and avoid being too negative about anything. I actually did enjoy a decent percentage of the episode. It's just that a good portion fell flat of my expectations, so I ended the episode not feeling all that satisfied. The episode opens up in what I assume to be Chandrila, the current capital of the New Republic. Hera is standing in front of Chancellor Mon Mothma and the other senators from earlier in the show, and I was glad they took the time to go back to Hera and her story. I wouldn't have been surprised if the focus on Hera and the New Republic ended after episode 5, but it was nice to get more development on that side of the galaxy. It helps add stakes to our galaxy as a whole, rather than just specific characters. The events of The Mandalorian Season 3 are mentioned, with Moff Gideon in the Battle of Mandalore, so it would seem that we've moved beyond that point in the timeline. The two shows were running together, and now this series is taking us further into a future that has not yet been told. The majority of the scene in the courtroom consists of Senator Ziono arguing against Hera and her actions, and he's just as annoying as before. He's a prime example of why the New Republic fell, because he's unwilling to see or admit to the rising threat. His actions have really made me consider whether or not he is one of the senators sort of in league with the Imperial Remnant, or early stages of the First Order. Some of the novels during this era, specifically Bloodline, deal with how the First Order rose and gathered support from star systems, and with the way Ziono is so adamant about shutting down any potential threat, I wouldn't be surprised if he's hiding something. But I think the more likely scenario is that he's just a greedy fool who wants the power that comes with his position as senator, and for this general to not believe that she's above him and the rules he makes. What was a huge surprise was a nice cameo from the one and only C-3PO. It felt roughly out of place to include another big-name character, but I'm definitely glad we got to see him here, and he fit nicely within the story. Senator Leia Organa is mentioned once again, as she saves Hera's career by approving the mission post-factum, and with how she keeps getting mentioned by these New Republic figures, and how this entire era is seemingly leading up to the rise of the First Order, and ultimately the Resistance as well, I could see this all as a way to test the water and potentially lead up to a Leia cameo in the future stories, possibly the movie from Filoni. The story then shifts back to Ahsoka in hyperspace, and we see her training with a hologram of Anakin on the T6 shuttle. Initially, I found it odd that there was a pre-recorded message of him on the ship, unless of course this somehow became a very personal ship to Ahsoka, but it's later revealed that Anakin made all of these recordings for her while they were together. There's the practicality aspect of it, but it almost makes it seem like Anakin could feel that something would happen between the two of them that would separate them and end her training. Or he just wanted her to have these discs for when she became a Jedi Knight and he was no longer around all of the time to help her. The scene also uses what I believe is the rest of the dialogue from the marketing, so I think it's unlikely we see Anakin again in the series, at least this first season. It's a bit disappointing that we never really got him as a Force ghost in real life, but there's only one episode left, and there's still a lot to do. With how the story is going so far, it really does feel like the season is just going to end with Thrawn making it back to the known galaxy, potentially with or without our Jedi characters. The Purrgil arrive at Peridea, and instantly they're met by seeking landmines that drive the whales away. I had assumed coming into this that the whales would just die there in space, as it is their typical resting site, and that would still fulfill the same purpose of raising the stakes and leaving only the one way back to the known galaxy. But instead they all jump back into hyperspace, leaving Thrawn and the Eye of Sion as the only way to return home. It really does feel like to me that they are setting up for one of these characters to either die or be stranded on Peridea. We get some nice playful banter between Ahsoka and Huyang again. It felt like forever since we've had that, and then we get the Asteroid Field Chase 2.0, a nice nod to The Empire Strikes Back. The series has done a lot to pull from other stories, both Star Wars and not, and it continues later on when Ahsoka uses the Force to find where Sabine is at. She reaches out to her in the same way Luke did to Leia on the Cloud City, and in my opinion this does show that Sabine has at least a hint of Force sensitivity to her, with just the fact that she's able to hear the call. The effects also looked very well done during the scene as the Eye of Sion fires lasers into the debris field. There have been times, mostly with things like riding the Howlers, that it looked a bit wonky, but at least the space combat has all looked fantastic. We catch up with Thrawn for a bit, and get to see his genius on full display as he learns that Ahsoka is the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker. Thrawn did meet Anakin, both as Anakin and as Vader, and he was one of the few people to learn the connection between them and still survive, so it's interesting to see if that knowledge will come into play. Hopefully it will whenever Ahsoka and Thrawn confront each other, as that seems inevitable, even if it isn't in this season. Sabine catches Ezra up on galactic history as well, and we learn that Zeb is training recruits, hence the reason we saw him cameo in The Mandalorian Season 3. Something that has also really stood out to me are the blue eyes of Ezra Bridger. Amon Esfandi, the actor, has brown eyes, so the change was done either digitally or with contacts, but I've really found it to be distracting as I watch the character. We then get to spend a brief amount of time with Balin and Shin, and this was absolutely the most intriguing part of the episode. There's so much we have yet to see from these characters, and I find it hard to believe it'll all get wrapped up in the last episode. We've seen Balin's desire to find whatever power is calling to him in this galaxy, and Shin has much different goals in mind. She wants to serve Thrawn and the Empire and have the power that comes with that. She doesn't see eye to eye with her master. So what does he do? He leaves her to confront Ezra and Sabine on her own. Now, to his credit, he sticks around and attempts to prevent Ahsoka from disrupting his apprentice's mission, but as soon as Ahsoka escapes him, he has a moment where there's concern in his eyes, and then I assume he just goes off on his own to search for the power. His character has fascinated me for the entire series, and I really do hope they continue to do his character justice and not just kill him off suddenly because of the passing of Ray Stevenson. I've theorized about whether or not either Balin or Shin could turn and help our heroes, and after the way this episode went, I think it's still up in the air. Balin is off on his own, likely to be stranded on Peridia, but he's cut all connections with Thrawn and Elspeth. And then Shin seemingly cemented herself in the darkness as she goes to kill Ezra and Sabine, but the look on her face as the troops fall back at the end of the episode. It was a helpless, lost child who is abandoned by her master and knows she's outmatched. Maybe it's just me overthinking things, but I think they've done an incredible job of leaving us on the fence about these characters and where they could go in the future. The second half of the episode was mainly just a lot of action. I thought it was all pretty good for the most part. We got to sort of see the Night Troopers in action, and with how smoothly they run, it does seem to potentially eliminate the theory that they are zombies. Ezra turns down his lightsaber from Sabine, which makes sense given he hasn't used it in years, and there's a chance Sabine is better with it at this point than he is. It was nice to see Ezra fighting again, but there's only so much you can do with the Force. For the most part, it was just a lot of Force pushes, and for someone who has probably spent the last decade training with the Force, I'm hoping we get to see him use some new moves down the line. Him turning down the lightsaber also makes it seem more likely that he doesn't make it out of this. It's been a popular theory among some fans that he doesn't end up returning to the galaxy, which after his line about going home to end the episode, would make it even more heartbreaking. But as we go on, it's seeming more and more likely, as much as I hate to admit it. The ending also seemed rather hopeful given where we're at in the story. Typically, the penultimate episode would end on a low point, but the characters seem to have little concern over how exactly they're going to get home, now that the Purrgil are gone and the only way back is with Thrawn. What did you think of this Ahsoka episode? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like the video and subscribe for coverage of Ahsoka as a new episode premieres every week. And remember to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you. Always.